Welcome to Beyond the Surface podcast show. I'm your host, Ashley Ann. Join us as we speak with thought leaders who have walked the path of personal transformation. This is the space where we bridge the gap between modern truths and ancient wisdom to shape new perspectives and heal the collective so that we can unbecome all that we aren't and become more of who you have always been. Welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface, and today I am joined by two beautiful human beings, co-creators of this life. Jamie Marie and July Brook offer guidance to women who are on their healing journey to reconnect, to reclaim their voice and wild woman within. And speaking of reclaiming their voice and reconnecting, we are having a conversation around the stories that we tell ourselves and shifting and rewriting these narratives and how the generational side of things impact us and how they do and how we can begin to do the work and how healing is truly this place of coming back to love at the end of the day. So let's dive in. I am so excited and also just honored. This feels like fresh and new to be able to be joined by two lovely human beings who are doing some incredible things. Like, I know you both have your podcast. So first and foremost, Jamie, July, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm excited to see where our conversation goes today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
I know. That's one thing that I love is I forgot to mention that, you're reoccurring, you're coming back, and we had such a great conversation for those that might have tuned in, and I'm excited to have you back and also here now with someone that you are kind of growing things with. So I'm excited to see where we take this conversation around narratives. And the place that I kind of wanted to begin with is, and maybe Jamie, you can kind of kick us off, but the place that I wanted to start with is what was kind of like one of those like narratives that played in the background for you? Like, what was one of those like prominent narratives that kind of kept you stuck? And how is it that you were able to like unravel it?
I was like thinking about this earlier today because I was like, I feel like that's going to be one of the questions. Why wouldn't it be? I think for me, like one of the narratives that like really stuck with me for a while was just kind of running that narrative of how you were raised. So there was like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like the exact things that kind of would go through my head, but it was like, you grew up poor, you're not worthy, you come from this basically, and your last name's this, or like whatever these stories are. That I think those were kind of the ones that really stuck with me the most and kind of were the hardest to kind of move through. Was like, well, that's where you come from. So,
Yeah.
that's what you are, that's what you're worthy of, and
Yeah.
that's where you'll always be, kind of thing.
Yeah. Did you feel like you were always aware of it, or was there a certain period of in your life that you started to realize that you had these like stories or narratives around some of these things?
I think I was always aware of it in the sense of that it was always something that was like in the background of my mind, like playing. And you hear that voice and that story all the time. Every time you think about doing something for yourself, or stepping out of your comfort zone or trying something new, you hear that voice that's like, no, you don't do that. Like that's not what you do.
Yeah.
And I think through, obviously, like moving more forward in like a healing journey, you become more aware of what that is, as opposed to it just being this background noise that you just think you have to live with.
Yeah. And how about for you, July? Like, what was the narrative for you that kind of played in the background?
I didn't really struggle with so much the like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, but it was words that I would say, like in talking about my trauma or talking about my life, like, well, I come from trash. Like when I'm telling other people, like, this is what I come from. And just to to put that out there, the energy of it is so negative and it's affecting you, even if you're not telling yourself those things like, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. It's still not good. It's like you have to reframe it, right? And then the big one was in relation to my trauma. Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
my trauma is not as bad as some people's. So just get on with it, right? Like just sort
Yeah.
of dismissing it. And that was a big narrative for me that really affected me for decades. It held me back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Like
once you're
completely
able to
downplaying it.
address the childhood trauma, then you can actually start to move forward and really move into that conscious healing state.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've always said, with awareness comes so much power.
Mm,
And there's always this opportunity when you bring awareness to whatever it is, whether it's a narrative that's playing in the background that maybe you just weren't necessarily super conscious of that was playing and holding you back, whatever it is, or just even behaviors or habits. Once it's brought to your awareness, you have two choices. Like, you have the choice to just continue to let the
yep.
narrative play on, continue to do the thing, the
Yep.
habits, let them play, or you have the other opportunity is choice. And I've always stood by that, and I think that's such a powerful thing to be able to have the awareness and then be able to choose differently. And I'd love to hear both of your thoughts on this, but like I feel like we all have this ability to be able to choose differently, and I'm curious both of your thoughts on that.
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. No, because you can just keep doing the same things over and over, and you can keep dismissing the way that you're living and the routines and the things that you're saying to yourself. Or you take control and you say, okay, well, there's clearly a problem here. You identify the problem. Where is it coming from? And once you start looking at where, your issues are stemming from, that's when you really can start to heal and move forward in it.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
And changing the habits, changing the narratives, like, because it's all habits, right? Whether it's that you're a person that really self sabotages in the way that you look in the mirror and you think you don't, like you're less than in some way, you do all that negative self talk, which a lot of people do. Like, that's really a problem. Or if it's just that you're very much like I was, which is like, stay strong, keep going. You don't even do the negative self talk thing so much. It's just like you just have to keep going forward and stay strong. And it's like you've got blinders on
Yeah.
and you have all these issues, all this anxiety, all these, side effects from whatever traumas have been set into motion in your life, right? But you're not you're not identifying where they came from or why, or offering yourself any compassion, any grace, like
Hmm.
any forgiveness, right? And
Yeah.
so then once you start to identify it, exactly like you said, that's when true healing is just it's like the spark of it's go time. Now I can make some different choices. Now I can actually look at life in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that piece around like the forgiveness and also the self-compassion, because
Yes.
I feel like we are all doing the best that we can with what aware level of awareness that we have. And I think
Absolutely.
that's a beautiful part of healing and growth when you are committed to this type of work, is that your level of awareness continues to expand.
Yes.
It can only expand. I mean, you can't go backwards. You can't go in
No.
the reverse.
Nope. No. There were times in the healing journey when things got a little tough and you're kind of like, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
But you can't go
Can I go
backwards.
back?
You can't.
Where was
No.
that door?
And why would you want to go back,
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. I think where I've had those moments in the journey is kind of just like, ugh, feeling like, why do I always have to be the one that has to go first? When you are
Oh,
on this
yes.
path.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
It's a little frustrating. It's a little
Oh,
frustrating.
I hear ya. Yep.
Yeah, but I mean, that's just, I feel like when you're just committed to this, it's for yourself at the end of the day. It's for no one else. Ultimately at the end of the day, this is the growth that you've chosen, and the healing you've chosen to do. And it's, again, it's like you can't see any other way. I don't know why this is coming up, but when I kind of first was introduced into like personal development, and I remember it honestly felt like I walked through this door to like Narnia. It was like this whole other world that I was like, where am I? And what is this?
Oh, yes.
You know?
I feel like
And
that was a very similar feeling on
Mhm.
my end.
yeah, like I'm like, and now I don't know any other way. I can't unsee the things that I've been able to learn. It's like you can't go back the door through the
Mhm.
door. I know you said that, Jamie, but it's like you just can't go back. And it again, why would you want to go back? It's just yes, it's challenging and it's hard to be able to really sit with the uncomfort of all of it. And I think that's really the best way to put it is it's so uncomfortable to sit in this, to also just confront the trauma, the narratives, all of that. It's challenging, but at the end of the day, when it comes down to you in this life, you're ever evolving. And how can we do it any other way?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's just it, sitting in the discomfort. And it's not all discomfort either. Like there's so much beauty in the healing
Yeah.
process. So much. It's just, yeah, depending on what your own personal journey is, there might be times of deep discomfort and times when you're not really happy being in it, but there's always a light at the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing that, I mean, I loved that you were talking about language. And I think that's such a big piece around like the stories and the narratives that we carry with us. And I'm curious as well, like how were you able to shift these narratives? And for me, I guess where I'm coming from is was one of those people who really engaged in a lot of negative self-talk, and the only or one of the ways that I was able to really pay attention and rewrite those stories is by being so conscious when I was in that moment or in that loop,
Mhm.
this downward spiral of like you're not good enough and you're not this and you're not that, and it was like nipping them in the butt like right in that moment, and having to kind of like, even if I didn't fully believe the new narrative that I was writing, I had to do it so consciously. And I'm curious what your experiences have been with being able to shift these narratives. And yeah, let's start there.
I would say, first of all, that meditation for me has helped a lot with this because it's teaching you to slow down and notice how your thoughts are going through, right? Like just
Mhm.
learning to pause and kind of, it's like becoming friends with your brain in a lot of
Mm.
ways. Like that's what meditation feels like. It's taking that time to spend time with your brain and figure out how your brain thinks and how it drifts. Where do your thoughts go to when you're in the process of that learning to meditate, which so many people struggle with and say they can't.
Yeah.
But it's so essential, I think, in learning this disruptive pattern because those thoughts they come in, you don't even notice them so
Mhm.
often, like, they're
Yeah.
just there, and then yeah, so but when you're doing negative self-talk, yeah,
Mhm.
what did you do, Jamie?
I mean, I think for me, like what really helped me the most was journaling.
Mm.
Journaling what was in my head because you start seeing that shit on paper and you're like, "Ew, no thank
Yeah.
you." Like that, and I think that was kind of like the biggest shift for me was changing how I spoke to myself through journaling. And I'm
Yeah.
like still doing that now.
Yeah.
Because it's like
And
it's
isn't that
so easy for these like especially the negative self-talk, like that is so that can happen just like that and you're back in it and then like 3 hours later you're like, "Whoa, wait a minute. What am I doing here?"
Mhm.
So I think for me what has helped is journaling big time and like shifts when kind of like you said, like when you notice it in that moment. I don't know. I don't so much try to like shift the thought because that just hasn't worked for me, but I'll shift what I'm doing. I'll kind of like disrupt my day a
Hmm.
little bit. Like I'll be like, "Okay, I need to go outside for a walk or I need to do something. I need to listen to music. I need to dance. Like I just need to do something that's going to kind of shift my brain out of where I am right now."
Well, breaking the
Mm.
habits and routines, right? Like
Yeah.
adjusting.
Yeah.
Self-care would be essential as well as like the journaling, the meditating, just learning to actually stop dismissing yourself, taking time for yourself, because that's something you're not doing when you're being negative
Yeah.
and talking,
I would say that
bad about to yourself about yourself.
Yeah, I would say that's kind of another thing too that I would do is kind of just like tune in and be like, what do I need right now? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's going on with me? What do I
Yeah.
need? What is this voice
Yeah.
telling me beneath the surface? Do I need to connect with someone? Do I need to do something loving for myself? Like, what is it that I need? Do I need a nourishing meal? Do I need a hot tea? Do I need to go to bed? Like, do I need a nap? Am I cranky? Like,
Yeah.
what's happening?
Disrupting the patterns.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing. You're disrupting the patterns that you've become very comfortable with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember listening to this like episode with Mel Robbins, and I think she's very open about talking about anxiety. And it's not something that I myself personally have ever experienced, but I do know someone in close to me. But what it reminded me of, especially when you were talking about Jamie, of like disrupting and all the examples that you were talking about were all body. And I think that's such a really interesting, powerful little like nugget there that I want to highlight is that we are kind of in this, I kind of refer to it as like mental like clutter. It's all like neck up. It's all coming from up here. And it's this mental clutter. But when you really bring it down to your body and that is where we're talking about living from heart, from a place of love rather than a place of fear. And
Mhm.
that's what I feel like is this distinction is that all of this is coming from this place of fear. And the only other choice is love. And the way that we can actively or even very quickly shift that energy that we're feeling, because that's what it is this energy that we're feeling is through some sort of movement, like it's getting into our body,
Mhm.
going for the walk, dancing, whatever that looks like for you. Like everyone, we talk about tapping, we talk about like shaking it out, like all these different beautiful modalities, going to the gym, like whatever that looks like for you. It's like get into your body. I've always noticed that. And this is one thing why I've made it like it is a non-negotiable for me in the gym is because that's where I like get rid of all this mental clutter and I'm in my body. And when I'm in my body, it's like there isn't that space for the fears and these judgmental thoughts to like creep in when I'm so deeply connected. I think that's really what it comes down to is being so
Yeah.
deeply connected to who you are. I think when it's like peeling the layer of the onion and you peel back all these different layers of all these things that you thought about yourself that aren't true. It's just in ways like I've been recently this year have been like listening to A Course in Miracles, and like I don't know why this is coming up too, but it's just like everything that we make things mean, and
Oh, yeah.
it's the attachment that we are giving, our ego is giving to the thoughts that are coming through.
Yep. Yep. No, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many beautiful things. But I'm curious too, like in terms of stories and narratives, and how have you been able to make this like distinction between the narratives, or like that difference between the narratives that are kind of rooted in like fear and self-doubt and then ones that come from a place of truth? And what have you experienced between like feeling difference between both?
Well,
It's a
my
really good
goodness.
question.
I think it's just part of the being open to for self discovery.
Mhm.
Journaling is just so powerful for this of differentiating what is true and what is false, and asking yourself when the narratives, when you notice it. And I think as you start to do your healing work, you start to notice it more and more. Like it just sort of happens naturally because you're starting to ask yourself, am I loving myself today? Wait a second, is this loving myself? Like you're taking more pause and you're doing more reflection. And so you find your way in it, and, like to differentiate the truth from the nonsense that you tell
Mhm.
yourself. And, I think scarcity like mindset, that's a big one. Like that's been a big one for me, which is all stemmed in fear, right? And the fear is coming from anxiety. And so then like it's just noticing, yeah, like I mean, that's an obvious fear is usually a lie. It's your,
Mhm.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
your ego lying to you to protect you. And
Yeah.
in not serving you, and that, like, the ego's great and it's there for a reason, but unfortunately our egos have been fed by a society that instills fear in us. It's constant fear coming at us all the time. It's built into our societal structure. So,
Mm-hmm.
starting to break down that, looking at the societal structure, understanding, like, wait a second, this was not, I didn't put this here. Maybe even my parents didn't even put this here. This is just part of our society, to be very much fearful of losing your job, fearful that you're not going to be able to pay the bills this month, fearful that, you might be treated unkindly, or you won't be accepted by people, or, just all this nonsense that, I mean, because think about what happens for women. I think that's why we really struggle as women, is because we have so much pressure on how we look. That's built into
Mm-hmm.
our society. That's not
Yeah.
something that is within us per se. We're not born worrying about how we look, but in our society, that is a very big thing. And, women are the biggest consumers. They're targeting us all the time, telling us that we're not good enough. We don't look good enough. We don't act, the right ways, and we're not thin enough. And that's the marketing. And so it's instilling constant fear of acceptance, and constant fear of rejection. And it's just there. It's built into what we've been facing every day of our lives since we were put into school, probably, or
Yeah.
we encountered it with television commercials when we were little girls. We
Yeah.
watched the women in our lives obsessing over their looks, and maybe you saw your mother standing in the mirror going, oh my gosh, I'm so fat, and all that is just weighing on all of us. I don't know if I got off subject, but like
Nope.
it's really tough
Yeah.
to, because you're not just up against all the things, all the traumas that have happened to you in life. And, like, let's face it, women, we go through an awful lot out there, with a lot of sexual assaults. I mean, so common for all of us. It's unfortunate the amount of women I've worked with. I would say 99% of them have been sexually assaulted. So of course
Yeah.
there's fear. There's fear,
Yeah, of course.
even when nothing has happened to you in childhood and you've had these beautiful, wonderful parents and a beautiful childhood, you still can be struggling with all this stuff. And it's a serious problem that so many are facing. So,
Yeah.
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 Anything you want to add, Jamie?
I don't know. No, well, I mean, it was just as you were saying all that, it was just making me think of how much in my own journey finding truth, a lot of that had to, like, my truth, a lot of that did come from understanding generational trauma
Yep.
and
Mm-hmm.
understanding, women's history. I mean, I still have a lot to learn, but starting to dive into those things really kind of helped see that so many of these thought patterns weren't just from the things that had happened to me personally. These were societal, these were generational things. And when you start to kind of unravel those, that's when you really can kind of start to see truth,
Yep.
and then just expand from there with your own personal truth. And I think curiosity comes in a lot too. I want to throw that in there because that's been such a huge thing for me in my
Yep.
journey, is just, I think because of the way I was raised, which was very, very sheltered, curiosity became a thing because, like, I didn't even know what to look for in my journey. I didn't even know what to
Mm-hmm.
look for to find my truth. So it just became, just become curious. Just look everywhere and
Yeah.
see what fits, see what feels good, see what doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I love that you said the curiosity because that was like the word that as I was listening to you, like the I kept just curiosity. Like that's such a big part of being able to
Absolutely.
begin to rewrite these like narratives is simply questioning.
100%.
Absolutely.
Question
Where does this
everything.
thought come from? Yeah,
Yeah,
question every single thing
yeah.
that like comes through, the thoughts that come through, but also even just like to the extent of like questioning and not in a bad way, but just questioning some of the things that are being said to you and projected upon
Absolutely.
you. The
Absolutely.
piece around self-compassion, and I'm so glad you touched on as well the generational side of things because my goodness, we don't realize that our parents are doing this for the first time. You know,
Absolutely.
they're doing this life for the first time, just like we are, and we're learning and they're learning. And when we can have that self-compassion, it's not to say that there are parents and we're just going to like completely like reject anything that they say, but I think it just comes to a point where their job, my perspective is, a parent's job is to protect their child. Like, you are here to make sure that that little human stays alive. And then there comes a point where that child is going to be able to make sure that they stay alive themselves. And it's not necessarily their responsibility to, like, we just have to recognize that we have to give them we need to give them compassion as well. The self-compassion that we want to give to ourselves is the compassion we need to give to our parents. They're also doing this for the first time. They're also navigating the same things, the narratives, whatever that looks like, the traumas. They are also, and then you just keep going back, keep going back, keep going back. This is where the generational side, I get so passionate about, like, speaking about generational, because it's just, I've seen the impact of where, like, my own body image, confidence, and how that stems back in my maternal lineage. And it's just, it's like fascinating in ways to see how things are just continuously being passed on. And then the question that I guess I pose to both of you is just working with this and noticing that, what are some of the things, I know we kind of talked about like meditation and journaling, but what are some of those ways that we begin to, I don't even know, I guess maybe it is heal, maybe it is heal, maybe it's like starting to rewrite. What are some of the things that you've done in your own journeys navigating that?
Well, I think you bringing up the parents is very important because that was a big one in my own personal journey, was doing a lot of reflection on exactly what you just talked about. Is our parents, they're doing it for the first time, but also, right now, healing is it's the trend, but it's beyond that. It's acceptable now. We talk about mental health, and
Mhm.
our parents didn't have that. They just did not. And so if you've suffered from trauma that's been inflicted on you because of your parents and their trauma and their shortcomings, I think offering them forgiveness, and depending on your situation, whether that means, some people are estranged from their parents and that's fine, but you still need to make peace with it, because the truth is that everybody is literally doing the best that they can with what they have in the circumstances that they are in that moment. And sadly, for the generations before us, they didn't have these tools. They didn't have the ability to talk to other people about their struggles. Struggle was shameful.
Yeah.
Women weren't talking about how their negative self-talk affected them. Just one generation back, there was none of this conversation happening. So,
Yeah.
I think identifying with that, for me, it was a really big deal to, during a plant medicine ceremony, have the opportunity to step out of myself and like see through my mother's eyes. Like, that was really huge,
Having
to
goosebumps.
just be able to have that compassion for her, not only what she faced from the generational trauma that was just trickling right down, but also what she was facing with the societal trauma as well, what life was like for women when she was a young girl. So, and then it really helps you reframe things. So, and it's very helpful.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
just want to add like one thing before I'd love for you to share your thoughts, Jamie, is that, we can begin to see things from the lens of love has been big for me. Like, for me,
absolutely.
I've always said, like, a big part of, like, for me and my journey was like my relationship with my dad, but even recently it's both ends. And how can we also begin to get curious about not only like our reactions to things, because there's so much information to when we're triggered, but can we offer the same lens and perspective to our parents? And also, just not, I mean, we're talking about parents right now, but just all those very close relationships, and get curious about their triggers and their reactions and their maybe reasons and why they are the way they are, and also not go to speculation. That has been, the thing of relearning for me in my relationship with my mom, is just not seeing it as just like this, like almost like overbearing like neediness, but also just like seeing the love through it, and seeing, just getting curious about why and what's beneath all of it. Because there's always something beneath. There's always something. I know it's so cliche. I don't usually say this, but like, what is beneath the surface there? What is all of that? And the more that we can actually open up the dialogue, there's so much power in that. And I know it's not necessarily always easy, especially if you have the estranged relationships with your parents. But if you can, just having these honest conversations is such a powerful thing.
Absolutely.
And I think even if you can't, even if you're not able to have the conversations, I think understanding it allows you to have compassion. And like I think like you said,
Yeah.
like, forgiveness and all of that for yourself and for them, and have peace even if you're not able to have that dialogue.
Well, and I think, like Jamie said too, curiosity. Like in a situation where you are estranged from your parents, or those conversations just can't happen. Perhaps your parents have passed on. I mean, that's gonna create a problem for
Yeah.
some people, right? To just like you get curious. And I know, I've brought this up to women I've worked with before, is just like, what was it like for them during the time that they lived? What do you know? Follow some clues, just trying to form that story, because it does help you to form compassion for them. It does help you to understand things a little bit better and offer them some forgiveness and some grace. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just think in this moment too, I think about, I mean, obviously I'm in a position where I'm lucky to have both my parents still alive, but I am thinking about just like those situations, or what would it be like if I didn't have this opportunity, or be able to, if they weren't here, how could, is there a way, and it's just kind of like rhetorical, but just, is there a way still to even find the love and come back to love, even without having all the answers? And that, even in itself, is probably super challenging, because, as I don't know, maybe it's just our ego, like we want to know, we want to know with certainty, and we're not necessarily always going to have that certainty, especially in a situation where maybe that you just can't have that dialogue for whatever reason. But I truly believe that there still is a way to, regardless, love from a distance, forgive from a distance, be able to create that peace from a distance. And it does come back to doing that for ourselves, for nobody else, just for ourselves, always.
Absolutely. And I can say from personal experience, it is possible. It
Mm.
is
Yeah.
absolutely possible. If you have a parent that's passed away, you can still work on that. I was very lucky before my father passed that we actually were able to have some conversations, but there's always still, it's the layers, right?
Yeah.
Always the uncovering of layers and different things that come up. And if they're not there, it is possible to still heal it and to forgive them 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I think it's, I feel like I've always said, like, our relationship with those that have passed, like, it just, the relationship is still there, and it just takes a different form. And there's still ways to be able to have the conversations, although it might feel a little one way. That way.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I love this. I have two kind of like final questions that I love to ask, and I'm just curious to see like what kind of comes up for both of you. So the first one that I want to ask is just in the context of, maybe just what we've been talking about, but like, what is one of those things? What's like something that you've learned about yourself, whether that be like in the last year or just in context of our conversation? What's like one thing you've learned about yourself that maybe you're just like really proud of learning about?
um,
In the last year.
It doesn't have to be
Wow.
in the last year.
just in general, just in general,
Yeah,
something.
just in general.
Wow, let me think here. Totally got something.
I think when you're on the healing journey, you learn so much about yourself. My
Mm-hmm.
gosh, like, from uncovering hidden passions and gifts. That's definitely been something that's happening for me. I guess, like, I always knew I cared about people, but I had no idea to the extent for which I care about other human beings
Mm.
and their well-being, and like just the compassion that I have in me, because, there was so much else just weighing me down and so many thoughts pre-healing, and I was always kind and caring, but when you start healing, it just goes to new levels, and it's so beautiful. And, I continue every day, and I think it will be a constant journey to learn about grace. I just told Jamie the other day, I said, I think grace is an ongoing lesson in life that will
Yeah.
never end. I think it's all on the road to enlightenment, that you are just constantly learning to have grace, to offer grace to others, to offer grace to yourself, and where all these little, nuggets are out there where you can apply grace to them.
Mm.
And compassion, just, how deep compassion can run, and that it's all about love. It's everything is about love. And that, again, I think that's a lifetime journey in healing, of a really realizing how deep love truly runs, and profound love is, and how powerful, and that it's in everything. That's Yeah. It all goes back to love, the healing, because you got to love yourself, and that's where it all starts.
And our ego is like, doesn't always want to see the love. It
No, the
doesn't.
ego is just like fear, suspicion, protect, protect,
Yeah.
protect.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. I think for myself, like, I don't know, I was like trying to think when you were talking.
I know, I was talking to give her
I know.
time.
Thank you. She knows me well. She's like, I'll just give her some time to think. Honestly, like I think in the last couple years, I'll say, I think it's just been really nice to like, see myself in a different light, and kind of, not that outside validation is important, but I think what's been really nice for me is, in my own journey, is like kind of learning, I guess, what other people see when I show up, and like hearing that feedback. Because I think, especially I think when you really struggle with negative self-talk, is like sometimes that outside feedback is super helpful because you don't know.
Yeah.
Like, you've been stuck in those mindsets for so long. And so I think yeah, something, I don't know if I'm answering the question properly,
Yeah,
but I think like
you are.
something that's been really nice for me in the last little while is just getting this, being around people who are going to give you like honest, positive feedback, or, helpful criticism. But like, yeah, being around people who are going to shine a light on your good parts, and celebrate you for those. And it's been really nice to kind of get to know myself, I guess, in that way, and see what other people see, and then actually see it for myself too, not just be
Yeah.
like, oh, that's what you think. But like, I think it was like last year, for a while, I kind of started this practice of like remembering the common things that people would say about me, like positive
Yeah.
things that like are so easy to brush off and just be like, whatever.
Hmm.
But I kind of just started like remembering them and like writing them down, and really like looking at them and being like, okay, why are multiple people saying this? Is this true about me? Like, what are they
Yeah.
seeing that I'm not seeing? And then kind of taking those
Mm.
and being like, okay, yeah, no, that's accurate. And learning to
Yeah.
kind of like accept that as a part of who you are, and something
Yeah.
that's really
And to
good.
just acknowledge ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And to really see
Yeah.
ourselves is such a big, big part of that. And it just feels different when you believe it and you
Yeah.
really believe it and you really receive it, especially when someone is giving you that compliment. I've always said, like, just to really notice and pay attention when you receive a compliment and how you react. Because I feel like a lot of the times we feel a little uncomfortable, and we kind of feel like we have to jump to, like, either brush it off, or, like, make it or just like jump to like give a compliment right back.
Mm.
Yep.
And just that simple little thing of saying thank you. And
Yep.
Yeah.
just like trying that,
Just letting it soak
receiving.
in. Yeah.
Yeah, let yourself actually receive the compliment that is being given to you. It's profound when we can start to do that for ourselves, because then I think we can actually follow through with that, in the sense of we actually start to notice that we don't need those external validations,
Mm-hmm.
and we actually, all the validation ends up coming from our own self, and we're able to give ourselves that validation. But I feel like it kind of is part of this journey where, you do, in a way, like, part of the journey is needing to hear it from the
Mm-hmm.
outside world, and then it comes to this place and it comes to this day. And I think I just speak from the experience of, it will happen, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I resonate so much with you, Jamie, in the sense of that negative self-talk was so big for me, and now it's in a different place where it's not that I don't need it, and it's not great to receive it, but it's like I have my own back to be able to know it about myself
Mm-hmm.
already,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I just
I
keep thinking
love.
of, like, we did a practice recently on one of our episodes, actually, where it was kind of like we were like, I think it was like celebrating self, but then we
Yep.
did this practice where, like, we went back and forth, and I think we said something that, like, something we were proud of for, like, each of our own selves, like what we were proud about for ourselves, and then we actually did a back and forth of, like,
Complimenting each
complimenting
other.
each other,
Yeah.
and it was
Mm,
really cool. Like, it
It
was a
really
really,
yes, it was.
it was, I don't think I would have been able to do that, like, last year or something, right? But
Such a great
it
practice
was
to
such a good
do
thing to
with your
do.
friends. Like,
Yeah.
what a beautiful evening that would be, to just sit and gather with your share, compliment each other, and like, I really love this in you. You
Yeah.
inspire me in so many ways. These are the way, just, you're beautiful. I love the way you put outfits together. It could be
Yeah.
anything, and I think
yeah,
that, we don't do that enough, and we certainly don't do well with receiving compliments generally.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a
amen
game
to that.
changer.
So true.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. I love so much both of what you both shared. And the last thing that I want to have from both of you is also just like words of wisdom for whatever feels most like prominent right now, from like, the different things that we talked about in this conversation, that inner dialogue, the negative self-talk, rewriting our narratives and doing the healing work. What are some like final pieces of wisdom that you can share?
These are the moments when my brain always just wants to have a really good joke to throw out there, or like bust into a rap song. I'm sorry, I can't help it. That's just how my brain works, where I'm like, I wish I could just start rapping right now and it be pure wisdom.
Oh
That
my
would be so great.
goodness.
I'm going to work on that.
Do you need me to go?
No, you'll steal all the good words and then I won't know what to say. Words of wisdom. Yeah, you go first.
Well,
Or you know what, Jamie? Start with like, what is something that you would tell yourself last year, at the beginning of last year?
Ooh, the
I don't know if
beginning
that
of
helps.
last year. It might take even more time. I'm just kidding. Beginning of last year. God, I feel like I feel like this is one I would tell myself many times in many years. Trust yourself more. Trust yourself
Mm,
more. Trust your intuition. Trust your gut. Don't be afraid to speak up. Trust your journey. It's going to be okay. Yeah.
so good. I love that.
I would say just that it doesn't matter what you come from. It doesn't matter what your past has been, how you were raised. It doesn't matter if you've done bad things in your life. Everyone is worthy of love. Everyone has the potential to heal, to just over and beyond levels, be like just beyond what you could even imagine will happen to you when you start opening this door to healing and you start peeling back those layers. It's worth the work. It is 100% worth the work, because the beauty that is revealed, just, it's like there's no words for it. You can't even describe what's going to happen when you start this healing journey to anybody. You can't even imagine. And for anybody who hasn't gotten there yet, or thinks that there's no hope for them, there is nothing but hope. And it's just amazing what happens and what you discover about yourself when you start on this path. So I never would have imagined in my wildest dreams that I would have come to where I am now. Like, if you go back to my younger self and the anxiety that I lived in, just debilitating anxiety. And yeah, and I just didn't think I was worthy in any way. I didn't even know there was a problem. So, yeah.
I agree. I mean, I resonate in the sense that I never would have been. I remember actually like a teacher from high school knowing who I was and knowing how shy I was. And after I went back and visited after I had like written a book, and he was like, "You got to break this down for me, because how did you, the shyest, like one of the shyest people in this room, how did you write a book? How are you doing speaking?" It's like, it's exactly what you just said, of just, you just never know. And
No.
what was kind of coming through is just like the piece around healing. And I don't know why this came through, but it's just like this, it's this journey of opening your heart back up.
Yes.
Because I feel like we really close our hearts when we're hurt, when we experience trauma, and when we just have all of this weight and this pressure. We're closing our heart, and we put like shackles around our heart. And it's this journey of being able to take it all off and be able to open up our hearts again. And of course it's not easy, and of course it's vulnerable, but I will always say, hands down, it's always worth it.
Oh, so
What
worth
you
it.
experience is far beyond greater than living in a space of fear and just not knowing, or like the what if.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's there's no words for what actually happens in the, when you start this healing. It's just there's no words. And every day just continues to amaze me of how much
Mhm.
better I feel. And yeah, it's been a phenomenal journey. And
Well,
it's
I
just
am.
beginning.
It's and isn't that the thing too? It's still just beginning. When you get to, it's always a beginning. It's never an ending. Everything is always going to be a beginning. It's always going to be this constant evolution. And I mean, everything, the way that you look at it is all perspective. Like, you can look at that from the lens of like, oh my God, I'm never going to be done. No, you're never going to be done, because
No.
that's how great it is.
Yeah, and you're gonna love it. You're
Yeah.
gonna love that you're never gonna be done.
Yeah. Right?
Yep.
Just, yes. I think when I've also kind of always said too, is just like the journey of like healing and doing this work is, yes, there's going to be these like moments where it's going to feel like a very dark night of the soul, so to speak, but it's not necessarily all that. It gets to be playful as well. And that's, I feel like it just all depends. There's also, it's going to be a mixture of both, the duality of both, but it's also going to be playful if you can like stay in that curiosity, right? Like, it's, the child, right? We're so curious. We're just curious human beings as we come out into this world.
Yep.
And that we're playful and we're curious, and that's the essence that we all have within us, that we can continue to carry on no
Yes.
matter where we go.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media. And we'll see you in the next episode.